Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of NISBET today, we have a very important subject that we are discussing, which is profits from war. We have two extremely fine panelists, Major General SVP Singh and Major General Prabir Chakrabarti. I'd start with introducing Major General SVP Singh first. General SVP Singh is an alumni of the prestigious Rashtriya Indian Military College, the National Defence Academy, and the Indian Military Academy. He was commissioned into the Corps of Artillery. He's a veteran of the 1971 Indo-Pak War and had nearly 4 decades experience in key leadership roles at both the conceptual and directional levels in military operations. He held coveted command and staff appointments in active combat areas. He has attended the prestigious courses at the National Defence College, the College of Defence Management, and the Defence Services Staff College. He's a member of the Institute of Defence Studies and Analysis and United Services Institution of India. He's a recipient of the Vishesh Seva Medal for Distinguished Service. He frequents the TV channels as a defence analyst. Major General Dr. P.K. Chakrabarti. He too is an alumnus of the National Defence Academy and the Indian Military Academy. He was commissioned into the Regiment of Artillery on 31st March 72. He's a silver gunner who has undergone the Long Gunnery Staff Course, the Staff College, and the National Defence College. He was responsible for procurement of artillery equipment and selection of officers to the Indian Army and the Indian Navy. He retired in December of 2001 and has since, and during the service, he also served as the defense attaché to Vietnam, where he cultivated a keen interest in China. He's a prolific writer on strategic subjects. He's done his PhD from the Hindustan Institute of Technology and Science. He's an MPhil from the Madras University. He's currently a defense analyst and a senior fellow with Center for Land and Warfare Studies. Post-retirement, he is busy with numerous discussions and writing commitments. He's written books, articles, and projects for various organizations, including IDSA, USI, CLAWS, CENJAWS, and VIF. His areas of interest are strategy, firepower, defense procurement. He's a defense expert and frequently writes on these subjects. His book, Firepower 2030, published by CLAWS, is a seminal work on the subject. This was followed by Weapons and Missiles in the Indian Environment, Assessment of Chinese Military Modernization and its Implications for India. He edited a path-breaking book, Future for Land Warfare Beyond the Horizon. Currently, his new book, Future Technologies for the Indian Army, has been launched by the Vice Chief of the Army. He is currently writing a book, Afghanistan Conundrum, China, Pakistan, Taliban, and Beyond. I'd like to say a few words about the subject, profits from war. Though they say it is not ethical to profit from war, as it involves the suffering and loss of innocent individuals. Therefore, most countries have laws, regulations in place to prevent individuals or companies from profiting directly from war. However, there are some industries that may indirectly benefit from war, such as the defense industry, which provides equipment, technology, and services to military organizations. Additionally, some companies may benefit from post-war reconstruction efforts. Profiting from war is a controversial and ethically complex topic. While some industries and individuals may benefit financially from war, it is important to consider the human cost and the long-term consequences of armed conflict. Here are some ways that war can lead to financial profit: military contracts, reconstruction and development, natural resource exploitation, financial speculation. It is important to note that while some industries and individuals may profit from war, there are also many costs associated with armed conflict, including human suffering, loss of life, physical and emotional trauma, and long-term economic and social impact. There are a few sayings which are correct even today, which says war is a racket. It always has been. It is possibly the oldest, easily the most profitable, and surely the most vicious. It is the only one international in scope. It is the only one where profits are reckoned in dollars and losses in lives. When the United States invaded Europe in World War II, they found that Germans were using Ford and Opel engines, whose parent company was General Motors in the United States. During the Gulf War, 26 companies sold weapons to both sides of the conflict. A subsidiary of Halliburton, which is a logistics company, a military logistics company in the United States. It has a subsidiary in Cayman Islands, which was selling oil to Iran during the Iraq conflict. Arms manufacturers have no loyalty to their parent country. All they look forward to is profits. I will now call upon the panelists to take about 4 to 5 minutes and speak on the subject, and then we'll take it on from there. General SVP Singh, you go first, sir.
Thank you, Pawan, for the introduction and for having assembled a very, very challenging subject, and a subject which has got deep meaning and deep rooted, I think, ever since civilization has come into force. Now, profits of war, sometimes called windfall profits of war, unused profits of war, has been in time immemorial functional. Now, how is it going about in the present day context, and how has it been historically? You have covered in your introduction very, very aptly the major points. You see, the beneficiaries of this, I would say, are the military, in the economics, the energy sector today, the food and grains which are suffering, the pharmaceutical industry, the health industry, they have all come into play in this. The criminal gangs, the terrorists, they are all the beneficiaries of war, profits of war, illegal, whatever we may call them. Now, while doing so, I'd like to touch a little on the historical aspect of what happened to India, the golden goose of till about the mid-century, mid-20th century, 19th century. When the East India Company came, 1757, 1765, they formed the East India Company. There has been, in those 200 years almost of British rule, today, if we work out, and there is Utsa Pandey, who has taken out a very seminal work on this, says that Britain today has stolen $45 trillion of India's wealth during the period 1765 to 1938, and this has been based on research data. Now, how it has happened? It was through the trade and taxation system. The revenue being collected from the Indian public, 1/3 of it was replowed back to the Indian public, and they had to buy from that for what they had paid in the taxes. And later, when the British Raj came into force in 1858, this was further refined. The British, they further refined to their benefit. They got the currency bills. With that, the Indian traders could buy or export items abroad, but they had to buy these currency bills from London, and they had to pay in gold and silver. But ultimately, when they got the return, it was in rupees. So this is how India suffered. The golden goose got poorer. And this money, which I have now equated with the profits of war, the Britishers also used for invasion of China in 1840s. They also made good of it during the industrialization by selling to the European countries and importing back iron, tar, and timber, things like that. So, and further, the other colonies which came up, Canada and Australia. So that is one part of how profits from war emerge. Now, further, when the breakup of Soviet Union came about, it was believed that now major conflicts and Cold War era is over. But it has given rise to regional conflicts. And what we have seen today, what has happened in Ukraine, the NATO countries having reunited, the proxy war has come into play. US appears to not have learned the lessons from the Vietnam War, from the Korean War, Iraq and Afghanistan experiences, and fresh from humiliation in Afghanistan, now they are embroiled in the Ukraine war. And what's happening? The armament industry is in full play. Now, 5 to 7 conglomerates which are there, they are reaping all the harvest, like Northman, Grumman, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, these companies. And alongside this, when we say profits of war in the military armaments, it is not only these defense contractors, the armament companies, it is also the politicians. There's a nexus which goes on. And the best example again is America, because they've been in the forefront of all the wars. And a lot of things have been reported about their doings during this time. About $144 million was found to have been donated by these defense contractors to the congressional candidates in the 2010 elections. So that is one of the things about the war. Now we have seen what has happened in the energy sector very recently, now which is concerning the whole world. What has happened in the energy sector? Absolutely high profits have been made by these companies, by the energy companies, and Exxon, Mobil, like these companies, Shell. So what has happened? The public, the American public or the public elsewhere in the countries has suffered from these high costs, be it Europe or be it in America. The public has had to bear the burden apart from the war front. So this is another aspect of the profits of war, which has to be taken care. And I close here now.
General Chakrabarti, your opening remarks, sir.
Okay, I would like to put it, you have already brought out, both of you, very, very well, what are the profits from war. The point is, who makes the profit? The Second World War was fought. Who made, was anybody, who lost? I think the United Kingdom or Britain was the biggest loser. So we're going to see who makes the profit. I think the United States has benefited from all wars. There's no question. I've been in Vietnam. They are even in Afghanistan, where $14 trillion have been spent. You lose the war, and then, as Captain Pavan Aluwale has very nicely brought out, you reconstruct. So whoever is reconstructing Afghanistan, he makes the money again. You then thereafter get involved in what you call supplying weapons. You make the money again. And thereafter you get involved in private security, you make the money. And so in any way, the United States finds that this business is extremely profitable. Wherever they have fought, they have been winners. I haven't found them losing on a single front as far as this aspect is concerned. $14 trillion spent in Afghanistan. Now, I would say, General SVP brought out $45 trillion UK may have taken, but today UK is in a bad shape. So much so even the Kohinoor diamond possibly is not being going to be owned by the Queen Consort. Whereas India has been able to recover. The point which I am getting is, look at the beauty of the United States. Its ability to convert everything to a profit. So we have got to understand that we have gone into such a dimension now. Economics has become now a war. So you got economic wars, you got trade wars today. The trade war which is on between China and the United States. You got economic wars where today the dollar, despite the Ukraine war, is rising. And you may say anything. The beauty is to understand how exactly can you earn profits. I think the Americans have learned one thing, ever since the United States was created, and one has to get into research of this as to how the US has been able to understand one subject. I won't call it economics, but profiteer. How to profiteer from any venture. Now, it's an issue which requires a lot of thinking. Like, I'll just quote only one example. We have the IPL. There is Shah Rukh Khan who invests in the Kolkata Knight Riders. That's one team which makes the maximum profits not by playing matches, but by other issues. Now, today everything is a war. A match is a war. Economy is a war. Today you catching an aircraft is a war. Today you transmitting on telephone is a war because you got cyberspace has become war space. So considering everything, profits has become the main issue today. And the main thing is, how do you make profits? And I think the United States possibly has taught everybody what is profiteer. The beauty is Russia has also picked up tabs. And look at it, Russia today, despite fighting a war for 1 year or whatever they call it, special operations, Russia has been able to manage a better economy than it was before. Now, this is something which is unthinkable, but the issue remains very clear that Russia is able to handle issues in a confident way. The next thing which I would like to say is there are small countries like Taiwan, and we have now entered a new definition, which is known as the gray zone. Now, gray zone means you are forever in conflict. Now, today, wars are no longer declared, they are no longer fought, and even everybody has said this is not the time for war, obviously. So you're not fighting a war, but today everything has become a war.
30
And
seconds.
the main issue, yeah, I'll just finish by saying only one thing. I think the lesson for all of us is how to learn to make profits out of every venture. I rest my case for the moment.
Sometimes you profit from war even if you're not directly involved. And today the saying goes that if you're not directly involved, but you are aiding and abetting the war, you make more money. Like in the case of Ukraine, for example, it is the Ukrainians who are suffering losses. It's the Russian who are suffering losses of lives. But the people who are actually profiting are the people who are making the armaments and supplying to them to fight the war. So it is the Russian armament factories that are making money. It is the American factories which are making the money because they are producing the equipment to supply the weaponry for people to fight. So the misery is for the people of Ukraine and the people of Russia who are dying. But the money that is being made is by the people who are making the armaments. Your views on it, General SVP Singh?
Captain Pawan, you have put it very aptly. There is no doubt. And so did General Chakravarti bring out that America has mastered the art of profiteering. And this is all the game of profiteering. And that is why we have never seen the ceasing of conflicts. I will put it this way. History is the story of man's misfortunes, follies, and crimes. And they keep taking place first and foremost on the battlefield. And this is what is happening. Armament industries will keep coming up. The scientific engineering research will further play up, join hands with them. And this game will continue. Today, 155 millimeter caliber or the shells availability, Americans are thinking, okay, what to do next better. So that is the thinking. So HIMARS, we are thinking 155, whatever, but there are further improvements which scientific research is going to get. And there is under the table gains in all these fields. Now, you talked about armaments. We have talked about, I also touched about energy. I'll further take it on. Look at the Russian crude and oil, which ourselves, India has taken on its imports. We were hardly taking 0.2% of the oil in the earlier years. But what has happened in the last 1 year? It has gone up. Today, there is almost 25% of Russian oil which is coming to us at lower cost, 20 to 30 dollars per barrel. It went up a little, and we are doing very well. Not only that, you see this crude oil which is coming. We have our refineries, and we are exporting from our refineries. And today, America is the number one importer from India for the refined oil. So you see the indirect gains from this war, India has also benefited in a very masterly manner because we stood out with our strategy of autonomy, and that is paying us dividends. And so hats off to the governance there. So I think I've been able to give you a reasonable answer to your question by combining the armament part with also the energy factor, which has been the main concern for the people of Europe in particular.
General Chakravarti, the Russian airspace is being denied to the powers to fly their airlines over Russia. And the Indian or the Air India has jumped from a 47% share to a 67% share in the last 2 months. How do you explain this?
I would like to understand this 47 to 67 Air India's jump. Can you just explain it a little better to me?
You see, they had a share from India that was going to the United States or Canada. The other airlines had a larger share than the Air India or the Indian Airlines share. But today, because the airspace over Russia is denied to the Canadians, it is denied to the Europeans, it is denied to the Americans, but it is open for India. So India is spending less on fuel to fly aircraft into the Western world as opposed to the Western airlines flying into India. So the share has jumped up for the Indian airlines, especially Air India.
Fortunately, I have just flown to the United States, and I flew Lufthansa, and we had to go to Frankfurt, and it took a longer time to go to Frankfurt because, as you rightly brought out, we could not overfly Russia. And undoubtedly, it is an extra fuel. And even when I came back we went onwards, of course, from Frankfurt to Houston, which was a no problems flight. But again, on the return, Houston, Frankfurt, and Frankfurt to New Delhi, we had to avoid Russia, which meant almost about 2 hours extra flying time, as you correctly brought out. Now that brings in a lot of difficulty, and Air India is overflying Russia undoubtedly. And you're overflying Russia, you're straight away into Frankfurt, or you're straight away over Europe, shall I put it. You're on to Poland, I'll put it correctly. That from Russia, you're on to Poland, and then you just graze off over, shall we put it, Greenland, and on to Canada, and on to the United States. Now, definitely, undoubtedly, what you're saying, this puts Air India into a great, not only shall I put it, economic benefit, you're also seeing an order of 470 aircrafts, which you would agree possibly is the highest order which anybody has placed so far.
But just that is not something to do with the benefits of war. I would just ask this question. Now, Ukraine and Russia are having a war amongst themselves, or they're having some kind of a conflict. The Indians are also benefiting because of Ukraine and Russia not on good terms with each other. Our wheat exports have gone up. We have access to cheaper Russian oil. We use the Russian airspace where others cannot. The IT and ITS contracts, which were generally, with the Ukrainian people, are now having a tendency to shift back into India. And India's neutrality has benefited them. So in a way, India too is profiting from the skirmish in Europe at this point of time. Your opinion on this, General SVP Singh?
Yes, Captain Pavan, I did also mention that India has made the benefits of this war, and very rightly so, because of our strategic autonomy. And I think we will continue to make good this part of it, because you see, grains, India again has done very well on the wheat front, and we have not only managed our domestic population, but now we are also exporting at a pretty good rate. So I think India is coming up very well and done very well to make the best of it. But going further, I will tell you that how we are benefiting from this is that we have placed ourselves strategically at a very pedestal-like position. And today India is being sought to be a mediator as well, more than China, who's trying to also put itself as a mediator by distance.
Mediation is not profiteering.
Yeah, it's I'll play it around this way, that mediation, the profiteering is also involving politics and war, and politics and power. And this is where India is coming. This is our part of profit in the political arena. But yes, I agree with you, not strictly on the profits of war, which we are trying to address in the field of armaments, energy, food grains, maybe pharmaceutical, all that. But you see, now look what happened when we evacuated from Ukraine our medical students. How high the rates our airlines charged. The rates were very high. That was also profiteering. So it did not help the cause of a national, our people who were there. So, but as far as Russia is concerned, I think we are right up there with them, and not only the oil, and it is also their armaments for which we will be affected, So that part of it, India has to reanalyze itself, reorient itself.
General Chakravarti, logistics is one place where countries make a lot of profit, but India does not seem to have been in the logistics space on any of the wars that have been fought across the world. To give you an example, Halliburton, which is one of the major logistics company out of the United States, they get paid cost of the equipment that they purchase plus a certain percentage. Let's say it's 5%. There is no incentive for them to drive down the cost, because they get paid on the cost of purchase plus 5%. So that 5% is more important to them. And the higher the cost, the more is the profit the companies make. But we as India seem to have missed out of this logistical environment. Your comments on this, and how do we get into this space?
I think firstly, what you brought out is very right. We have never actually looked at this. Our businesses have been generally confined to very, shall I put it, classical areas. We have never got into this area which you are saying of Halliburton, or say the others who have been looking into this area of logistics, where you enter and become this thing. Even today, Amazon, if you watch, it gets the entire products and charges a percentage, and it's profiteering all over the world. So we are getting into it with our startups coming in. I think we are entering this field, but this is not an easy field to enter. If I may say, Captain Pavan, if you want to enter the field of, let us say, logistics in a more devastated country, let's take any, Vietnam, Afghanistan, you have to have the support of some security agency. Our companies lack that, right? You cannot today ask, even let's say, if you want, let's say Adani, or today you want Tata's, or you want L&T to move into one of the logistics spaces, or let's say one of the startups to move into the logistics spaces which are there in Ukraine. It's extremely difficult without having the necessary security set up. Possibly now our companies, I've discussed with some of the companies, if I may say so, and they are looking into this field, but they are very, very chary right now to enter this field. They're a little scared. Maybe companies like yours can provide the security for these companies to move in. Premier Shield, which has got some security in it, they are able to get into the various, and the major issue, they are not looking for protection, they are looking for intelligence. Intelligence in terms of, can we enter this area and provide logistics? Is it worthwhile? Is it not worthwhile? If they get this much of information, they are prepared. Indian companies are by nature very cautious. They don't want to be adventurous. They are adventurous when it comes to many other areas, but into this field, I think it's a new field for Indian companies, and they've never ventured into it. They are very deliberate when they venture into it. This is my very cautious answer to it, shall I put it?
One of the things that happened during the Afghan war also, all the training efforts that were being brought in terms of training the police forces or training the armed forces for Afghanistan, the major contracting was done to American companies who in turn subcontracted them to other countries, companies across the world. So as India, we've never been the recipient of a direct contract.
Well, if I may answer it, it's possibly our reluctance to get into this field. Many a times we have subcontracted, so to many, including this what you call private security companies of the US, which I can name, but I would resist from naming. We have helped them, but we have been very, very cautious because of basically it's a new field. And I have spoken to these companies, and since they are dealing with defense, shall I say, products, I know these companies very well. They say we would not like to involve ourselves, because firstly, there is no official government support for these things. And secondly, we do not have any security intelligence. Without intelligence, no businessman likes to. Moment that, and you'd agree, intelligence is not easy for a businessman. You are a businessman yourself. Unless you get the correct security intelligence, you don't want to tread into this space, which is still, shall I put it, a gray zone. It is not a war zone, but definitely a gray zone. So the businessmen from India are very cautious, and I think they are still watching how to get into this field. But once we get in, I promise you, once we get in, we are very fast thereafter.
Now, I'd like to point out another thing. Reconstruction projects are also lucrative, and they assist the country which has been devastated to rebuild itself. Take, for example, reconstruction of Iraq. The companies that have got the major contracts are American companies. So the Americans go in and destroy Iraq. They go back and reconstruct Iraq. So you first profit by the armaments that are going in there, then you profit by the reconstruction effort that is going there. So, how do you look at this particular situation across the world in any of the other conflicts that are happening?
Personally, the Americans have adapted in this job. The same thing they did in Vietnam, they did it in Cambodia, they did it in Laos. I'm now giving you countries across the world. And they based themselves in one country called Thailand. Today, Thailand has possibly become a little wiser. They have got China also in. China has also become a little wiser. They have got into this same game. So when you look at it from that angle, as you have brought out, Americans have a lot of it. See, the whole business sector is, I remember once writing a note in the embassy, and I wrote very clearly, markets are like battlefields. You may not be fighting a war, but markets are battlefields. And the people from Thailand, with American support, have learned how to get markets into Vietnam, markets into Laos, markets into Cambodia, and so they learned this art. So Americans give you the intelligence, and once they give you the intelligence, their companies are able to move. And that's where the profit lies. I mean, say, undoubtedly, if today I have the intelligence that I'm safe, I'll go and do business. Now, I'll give you a very, very clear example. We had a situation in Cambodia, which I was handling myself. There was a clash between the two prime ministers, and we felt that we should evacuate the Indian businessmen. And the numbers were about 300. So naturally, one got what is known as an IL-76 on standby, and we were to evacuate. And obviously, we informed Agra that we would like an IL-76 at Pochintong Airport. Believe me or not, when the ambassador and I carried out a search on ground, not one Indian businessman was prepared to go back. Why? Because he had the intelligence that this is a temporary affair. So wherever Indian businessmen are getting the intelligence, they are prepared to stay. But in countries that you brought out, Iraq, Afghanistan, we have no means for an Indian businessman to get the intelligence. So what are we doing now? We are now today getting into some companies. We are getting into certain collaborative efforts with Blackstone. We are getting into collaborative efforts with, say, Lockheed Martin. We are getting into collaborative efforts with what you call Boeing. Now we are getting some intelligence. Previously, our intelligence at best was with pure commercial companies. Who are they? Coca-Cola. How much of commercial intelligence can Coke give? But today, let's take Boeing. Boeing has got commercial sector, it's got a defense sector. Lockheed, $45 billion is their, what you call, outlay on which they work. Possibly the biggest defense company. And Lockheed has got, along with Raytheon and others, many other companies which are going on. You would be surprised that as far as Lockheed is concerned, Lockheed is even involved. They were themselves come out with an interview during Aero India that they are involved with Ashok Leyland. I was surprised. So when I'm getting into American companies and their intelligence, they move in with the war effort and they provide it. I think Indian companies with the present defense and with the present, excellent geopolitical environment where America is today our biggest trading partner, you'll agree. The maximum two-way trade is with America. Our companies are getting onto America. We are entering this week. And my hats off to the Indian businessmen. I can tell you they are as much adventurous as anybody else. This much I can assure you.
You know, another thing that is there is the supply of weaponry. And we were not traditionally there, but from $1.5 billion, we want to jump up to $5 billion in defense exports. There would be a time where you would be sort of selling weapons to both sides of a conflict. General SVP, how do you see the situation unfolding?
Well, this I would call it as an opportunity which is coming our way, and thanks to Atmanirbhar Defense, which is coming about, and we want to become an arms exporting nation. And I think this is not only an opportunity, it's a challenge which we should take it on, and there's no doubt about it. I can give the example of BrahMos. You know, BrahMos, we have exploited it so well, Russian collaboration, but today Philippines is going to buy BrahMos from us and with Russian consent. Now again, that is where our maturity of our policy stands. And look at it, today only I read that the South Korean company with the FA-50 jet aircraft, they are getting the orders from Malaysia. But we were very close contenders as bidders in that for our Tejas. So it may not have come about this time, but I would still say that the opportunity is alive because they want 36 aircrafts and only 18 have been contracted so far. So perhaps our hopes will be there. And so this is where we are standing. Already we are exporting a lot of our armament ammunition towards the African nations and some in the Southeast Asian nations. So I think this opportunity, we will exercise our flexibility of independent policy and we will carry it forward. And you see, we want to be a regional power and we want to be a power to be counted, looking forward to become the third largest economy. And if that be so, to become an armament exporter is the bottom line for any nation to become great. So I think we are on the right datum line and we should look forward for better times.
General Chakravarti, which are the countries that are going to buy from India?
Well, I personally would put it very clearly that as far as India is concerned, you can expect that every country would buy from us. I don't put it that only Southeast Asian countries or European, everyone's going to buy from us. Because look at our arms we could. I'll just start with, let's say one. I mean, say I worked for BrahMos. So it goes without saying, I mean, say Philippines has bought it, Vietnam will buy. I mean, say I don't see any reason why a European country cannot buy it. It's a beautiful weapon. It's got supersonic speed. As a matter of fact, when we got it for the Indian Army, and I was very much there, everybody told us, why get one? And why not get an Israeli one? I'm telling you myself. I decided on it, along with the Military Operations Directorate. And we decided very clearly supersonic speed is something which gives it a great force multiplication. Okay, let's get on to the next, Pinaka. Pinaka is now going to Armenia. Third, let's get on to K9 Vajra. K9 Vajra is the state-of-the-art weapon. I don't see why Americans can't buy it. Why should they manufacture this in the United States? It's better that they give us an order and buy it from them. And today, if we get into an aircraft deal, I do not know which one, for the AMCA, with the, let's say, I don't know where the deal will go to. If it lands up with one of the companies in France or the United States, I see it being bought by everybody. And let's then finally get on to other components, minor components, which are not that, which are secondary or which are, say, tertiary. These will be brought by all countries. As a matter of fact, by about 2047, which is about now, say, 24 years from now, I visualize around for our defense exports would be anywhere to the tune of about $30 billion. Now, you would agree that's a huge amount. That would be the export, which I expect. Maybe more. And I see that everything, and I'll tell you why it will be exported. This is something which I have justified to our own government. You must understand, your value is the value of your armed forces. Today, look at our armed forces, the way they are deployed. So I'm quoting only the foreign minister. Such huge numbers deployed for a continuous period without any problems in hostile terrain and able to get anything there. You want a paradrop, we can get there. You want a gun which is to be dropped, it'll be there. You want today the forces to move into that region, we can. So naturally, the whole world is looking at your weapons. Everybody will buy, provided the three services say it's good. A parachute will be bought. If today Pawan's Unit 7 para says it's good, the word goes right to the United States without even 7 para going. But your own people, the armed forces, have to call it it's good. And I'm happy to say, having been in touch with our armed forces very intimately, I can tell you they are liking the equipment. And therefore, you can expect your exports really going at a higher trajectory in a steady way.
You're so right, because unless your own armed forces buy your own equipment, who else is going to trust them to be bought? So, I think we've had a very interesting discussion today, and creating profits from war is a very important subject, and logistics, reconstruction, private security contracting, or private military security contracting, and the supply of weaponry are three important ingredients from where people profit from war. Your closing comments, General Singh, and then your closing comments, General Chakravarti.
Thank you, Captain Pavan. Now, I would like to take on the last bit what General Chakravarti has spoken, and I, as a gunner, which both of us are, I would add our 155mm systems, the calibers which we have got, particularly ATAGs. I think we are the world leaders there, and that is another place the world should be looking at us to get the best out of them in the artillery systems. Now, as far as the profits of war, unused profits of war, which is the subject, is concerned, I think the most important thing is the military-industrial complex, which has to come of age, particularly in our context also. And now today, it is not only the military-industrial complex phrase which was given by General Eisenhower in his farewell speech, which he said that we have got immense military strength and we have got a great industrial complex, but we have to use this with wisdom because we are a great economy and we should be a strong nation, strong security, but with peace. I think the successive US governments have failed to live up to this message of his in his farewell address. So military industrial complex, I think, for India is a very important aspect. And same way, it is now the pharmaceutical and health industrial complex which has come into play, very important. And I would say in this, the self-sufficiency, what the world saw in COVID and what we saw, and how we saw there again, it was a war, artificial made war from the China Wuhan virus. And what happened? Look how the acute shortages were created in our own country, oxygen cylinders, how profiteering was done with that, even for medicines like paracetamols and all. So I think that's another great message which comes, that profiteering should not be there illegally. The United States has come out with an act to prevent this, but they never converted into law till to date. It came about in 2007 of prevention of these illegal actions, but they have not come out with it. So I think here again, this on the moral high ground, India has a great message to give to the world. I'll put an end to this point. Thank you very much, Captain Pavan.
General Chakravarti, your last words.
Thank you, Captain Pavan. I'll be very, very brief. And I'll just say that this is an important discussion and a message to all Indian businessmen. Because according to me, it's time now that the Indian business gets closely knit with the United States companies, which we are doing. If we can get closely knit with them and get the market intelligence and make today the best of what India would like, and that is to get the market intelligence for operating in the entire gray zone environment. And if we can do that, because it's our businessmen who are going to really see that the economy gets into a higher trajectory. Indirect benefits or whatever the profiteering from war or not this thing, it's the businessmen who have got to learn how to operate in these circumstances. And that's my request through your channel to all the Indian businessmen to get involved into this, because this is an area where they will get immense profits, which if they start investing. That's my only message which I have.
Thank you very much, General SVP Singh and General Chakravarti. I think India has never profited from war so far, but the Ukraine war has given us certain benefits from the positioning that we've had to get some indirect profits. And by the sale of weaponry that we are looking into, I think our position into the system would be much larger and better and stronger than we are today. Thank you very much, both of you, and I really thank you for your time.